We are 1 week away from the start of Ohio State spring practice, and we got to hear from the coaches on Friday. It's been a few days to think about it. So with Bill Landis, I'm Austin Ward. It's time for some Monday musings. We've had a couple opportunities to chew on what we heard. We had, an hour and a half between Ryan Day and then the 10 full-time assistant coaches on Friday at the Woody. It was great to be back there. Had some snap judgments, some immediate takeaways, but what's been sitting with you in the couple days since then, Bill? The number one thing that you just can't shake about these Buckeyes getting ready for next week?
I don't know that there's one thing that I can't shake that has been occupying my mind, but maybe the thing that I found, most interesting was some of the connections with Matt Patricia that maybe I wasn't aware of or hadn't quite pieced together, and I apologize in advance. I can't remember exactly what I said on Friday, but it goes beyond. Obviously, he and Tim Walton worked together at Syracuse for a time, whatever that was, 23 years ago, or whatever. But it seems like that relationship, in some regard, has maintained through the years, or there's some familiarity. It sounds like that Matt Patricia and Tim Walton were able to kind of pick back up on immediately, and Matt Patricia said that he and Tim Walton, sort of coverage wise, kind of speak the same languages to a certain extent. So that was good to hear, but it went beyond that, because that's the most obvious one. James Laurinaitis, I think, having some familiarity with Matt Patricia through working for Al Golden at Notre Dame, because Al Golden was Matt Patricia's linebackers coach with the Detroit Lions for 2 years, I think. And some of that language is familiar to James Laurinaitis. There's also a side personal bit where I guess Matt Patricia worked out James Laurinaitis when James was going through the NFL draft process. So that was kind of funny. And then Matt Patricia also said that he had a bit of a relationship, or at least familiarity with Larry Johnson over the years, partly from that time at Syracuse when he worked with Paul Pasqualoni. I think I said that right. Who's a Penn State guy. Larry Johnson was obviously at Penn State for a very long time. And then with Larry turning guys out through the draft over the years, Matt Patricia obviously being a defensive guy. I remember the one combine or pro day Matt Patricia was at Ohio State working out defensive linemen. So it wasn't it's a long way of saying this. So the Matt Patricia didn't walk in the door with only his name preceding him. People, I think, had some connections they were able to build upon, which I think is good, because it is, as Ryan Day pointed out during his availability, he wanted somebody to come in who didn't want to bring in his own entire defensive staff, but then that guy has to sort of assimilate into some stronger staff bonds and connections that were clearly good enough to get Ohio State a national championship. But it sounds like through some winding roads and different personal connections that Matt Patricia was able to kind of figure that out rather quickly, which is good.
I think if you go back a month and, talking about the surprise factor with this hire, and it wasn't a name that we heard a ton about or expected to really be involved. A lot of that was because if you're thinking about how often Ryan Day refers to the cultural fit, not just for the players, but with his coaching staff as well, it's Matt Patricia did not have the greatest reputation with players from outside program. We've heard Bobby Carpenter talk about his relationship with Matt Patricia and how great it was as well. Mm-hmm. Ryan Day talked about, reaching out to guys had Nate Ebner playing with the Patriots and Matt Patricia. John Simon was there for a long time. There's a lot of Buckeyes that are around in Columbus that you could get some easy insight to what that would be like. But Tim Walton, again, checks that box. That's not something that was front of mind for me in that. It was because Matt Patricia felt like an outsider. And in some ways, he still is. He's new, and he hasn't been working with these people consistently and regularly over the last 20 years. But there's at least some head start. And as you said, familiarity with the people that he's going to be working with that was not immediately apparent to me. And that's not to say, well, they got it. They nailed it. It's done. Matt Patricia's going to come in and Ohio State's going to keep being number one in the country in total defense. I don't know. We're going to see what that's like. I'd say that the early returns, not just Friday in a press conference, not just that the first couple of weeks seemed like were really productive with the coaching staff in the Woody as he settled in, and that people in support staff positions around the building were also coming away pretty impressed with their interactions with Matt Patricia. I think you could see a lot of that on Friday. That's just the starting point. They have spring practice in a week, but even player reactions when they were on social media responding to media availability and stuff that we were hearing about and from Matt Patricia. Those were pretty glowing as well. I think that there's a lot of excitement that is maybe that should not be a surprise at this point, but it's still worth pointing out. I think going in these early stages the way that Ryan Day expected that it would, which that's again a starting point. There's a long way to go, but that's an encouraging marker on March 10th.
I guess like as silly as it might sound, you just sort of want like kind of like the outward vibes to feel right when you make a hire like that, and I think that they do. And I think I sensed it from some of the fan base as well. At least like people who are like on the fence about this, but I think willing to keep an open mind about it. I think came away impressed with like how Matt Patricia kind of talked about why he's here and what he wants to do here, and even like some of the stuff he said about Detroit again, which I mentioned on Friday. I thought was well stated and kind of made sense to me. So like I'm a person who's definitely on the fence about it. I was probably squarely on one side of the fence to be more honest about it when the hire was made, and I'm probably still there. Like I'm not trying to flip flop on things, but I do think like the right things are being said, which is good. It's kind of like all you can do in the beginning of March, and then spring ball will start, and they'll start to install things, and we'll see how that goes, and we'll get the proof in the pudding when the season starts. But I guess maybe I was. When you don't make a hire like that, you're a little bit on alert for like just like fit immediate like this done. It's anything kind of like feel off about this, and I did not get that vibe at all. I guess from being around the defensive coaching staff and Matt Patricia on Friday.
I think the Tim Walton relationship, however long it lasted, however, it wasn't like they were longtime coaching colleagues together. But even having that familiarity that you mentioned already, I think is critical, because Tim Walton had wanted and potentially earned more responsibility with Ohio State and didn't necessarily get that. It's his title and his responsibility, I think, is going to be almost the exact same this year as it was a year ago. Now there may be more money. They may have added some different language. We'll see what that all looks like. But we went into this process and it was a lot of, did you hear what Ryan Day said about Matt Guerrieri? And other places wanted to hire Matt Guerrieri, thought they might be able to, like Matt Guerrieri. And, Berm and I talked with Guerrieri last week for 24 Ever. He was available on Friday as well. And it's like, Matt Guerrieri is very deferential to the knowledge that Tim Walton has. And given his importance as a recruiter, Tim Walton, and the fact that he has the experience at the NFL level as well and familiarity with Matt Patricia, like the relationship between those two is probably way more important than I realized or would have expected a month ago. And the fact that that's that entry point, I think maybe for both of them, like Tim Walton can look at this and it's not like he was entirely passed up. He is incredibly important in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center and is being treated as such. And the fact that Matt Patricia probably evaluates and values him the same way, that's critical for what the future of the defense is going to look like, the way that it is schematically, the way that it is built in terms of roster management and transfer portal and recruiting. I feel like Tim Walton has maybe not been given the proper amount of appreciation from me personally to the value that he's going to be carrying forward for the Buckeyes in the future. And Matt Patricia and Matt Guerrieri and James Laurinaitis, Larry Johnson, all down the road were pointing all of that out, and Ryan Day as well. So even if like the front facing position, title, money, all that stuff is not like dramatically changed for him, I do think that there is a growing sense that Tim Walton is more critical to the operations than I have maybe given him the attention for.
I agree. I put myself in that same category, and I did not spend really any time at Tim Walton's table when he spoke on Friday, just because people were all talking at the same time. So I need to go back and listen to all of what he said. But maybe the thing that struck me the most was how Ryan Day talked about him. To your point, like it was bringing in Matt Patricia like to work with Tim Walton, and I think I might have just had the wrong read on that from the jump. And part of that is. It's a couple of things. I guess it's like Matt Guerrieri's familiarity with Jim Knowles and that system, but then also kind of how Ryan Day talked about him at the championship celebration. I think kind of didn't send us like all the way down the road of like, oh, well, McArary is going to get like elevated here, but like we were certainly pointed in that direction by what was said. And the process didn't play out that way. And it's not to say that McArary doesn't have a voice, because he clearly does. And I don't think Ryan Day, was just making stuff up when he was talking about how highly he thought of him. But it did sort of just cause, I think, at least me, I'll just speak for myself, to kind of like look past the impact of Tim Walton. And even though Tim Walton has the co-defensive coordinator title and McArary doesn't, in my mind, I was like, well, McArary will be the one who's maybe more working on the coverage aspects of this defense. But it really does sound like it's kind of Tim Walton's deal, with everybody else kind of falling under that. And everyone has a voice there on the back end of the defense. It is collaborative, but Tim Walton was sort of like repositioned in my mind a little bit, beyond the guy who is clearly a very good defensive backs position coach and recruiter, but clearly I think has a pretty bigger impact on what this defense is going to look like than what I was initially envisioning.
Is it odd to you at all that like Ohio State lost both coordinators, and the instinct and like on snap judgments on Friday or on this show today for some Monday musings, like we just immediately go to Matt Patricia and the defense? I guess that's a reminder that Ryan Day still exists and is going to have his hand on the offense moving forward. But it's like we always start on one side of the football, and I just assume that the other is going to be fine no matter who's there. Like it is a fascinating new dynamic with Brian Hartline and Billy Fessler promoted and Tyler Bowen coming in. But it's like, I don't know. All my attention is just immediately going to the defense. It's like, well, Ryan Day is going to figure out the offense. I don't even need to think about it.
It is odd because you don't want Ryan Day to kind of fall back into a position where he was prior to 2024, where he was he was operating, I think you would say, maybe too much as the offensive coordinator and not enough as the head coach with a holistic view on the entire program. And I guess I didn't sense from him that he was nervous about that. And even in addressing the fact that he probably will be more offensive leaning this year than he was last year because of, the nature of Brian Hartline's experience and him having to be him just doing it for the first time. I think Ryan Day will lean more, and a new quarterbacks coach too. Like Ryan Day will just, I think, naturally be drawn more toward a lot of that. He to me like didn't say it in a way where he was like, I don't know, like we'll see if this works, and if it doesn't, like I guess we'll have to make some changes. Like he expressed a ton of, because he like even in 2023, I did not find him very convincing when he said he was.
It wasn't even close to convincing.
Yeah, and like he wasn't trying to hide that fact either, which I guess I give him credit for. Like he was just sort of being honest with how he felt and couldn't help but let those emotions and things kind of seep out. But this was all very different for me, listening to the way that he talked about it on Friday. So it is odd though, because I think it makes more sense to worry is not the right word, but focus more, I guess, on the offense, given the turnover there and the lack of experience, as opposed to the defense, where it's like, yeah, Matt Patricia, I guess, hasn't been in college for a while, but he's coordinated defenses for quite some time. It's not like, he has to have his hand held doing that. There are other things there, I guess, to wonder about. But as we've said, these early on, they're addressing those things. It seems quite well. But yeah, I guess it's the beauty of having an offensive leaning head coach that you just sort of don't worry about it. But this is the most interesting it's been on that side of the ball in quite some time, with all the changes that are happening there.
Now, I went back and listened to it again and read through the transcript again just to make sure, because the thing that I left on Friday was like, it felt like Ryan Day kept exclusively calling Brian Hartline first-time play caller. Like, did I hear that as many times as I thought I did? And should I read into that there's some level of concern? Like, I know that there's not deep down. Like, Ryan Day made this choice purposefully, that Brian Hartline has spent enough time and proven himself repeatedly for Ohio State, and lots of examples behind the scenes of how that has happened. Mm-hmm. Like, is there some subconscious part of Ryan that's like, this is a lot for somebody to go do that the first time? Because he did say first time. Like, I believe that Brian Hartline's going to be good at it. I know he's incredibly sharp, great football mind, the passing attack and how much he was involved in that, because that was not Chip Kelly's forte. You had I think even a year ago, Brian Hartline, Keenan Bailey, and Billy Fessler, along with Ryan Day, really critical on that side of pass game coordinating. It's like, I think there's all the reasons that Ryan Day is making that bet on Brian Hartline make total sense for me, and I would do the exact same thing. But it feels like he is at least planting seeds. It's like 95%, this is going to be great. But it also is a daunting job to go do the first time because he said that 6 times.
Yeah, I think you could be onto something. I guess my read on that was that he was just being sure to make the distinction between what has been and what is new, because he can't just call Brian Hartline the offensive coordinator, because Brian Hartline has technically been an offensive coordinator for now going on 3 seasons. So I think it was just that. I don't know if there's anything else subliminal there that Ryan Day is necessarily worried about.
I'm not trying to create it. I just was thinking as we left, like, he said that a lot, and he doesn't make accidents.
He did say it a lot. I think it's probably good to, and it's not in a way to like undermine Brian Hartline or like cover up for like things changing or something like down the road, but it's a distinct skill set. Like, you can be an incredibly sharp offensive mind and the best receivers coach in the country, which Brian Hartline is, and have a incredible depth of football knowledge, but being able to sequence all of it quickly and turn that into play calling on the fly is a pretty difficult thing to do at a very high level, or at the level that Ohio State expects from its play caller. So maybe, I think sometimes, like, covering Ohio State and talking about Ohio State, it's easy to just assume like things will work out, or things will be fine, or things are easy. And maybe this is Ryan Day's way of also reminding us that, by the way, this is pretty hard to do what Brian Hartline's doing. Not that he can't do it, but just that, like, he's taken on a task here that might even come with some growing pains, and perhaps trying to get out in front of some of that too. But again, it doesn't come from, at least in my opinion, it's not coming from a place of doubt as to whether or not Brian Hartline can do the job.
I was kind of bouncing that idea off a couple people on Friday afternoon before we left the Woody. I was like, what are the odds, like, that Ryan Day is just saying this, like, he could fall back into the old habits and take it back? Because he was asked about it, he talked about it. He doesn't want to do that, and I don't think there's any way that he's gonna do it and go back into calling the offensive plays. And the reason that was posited back to me was, like, Chip Kelly was not a perfect play caller last year, and Ryan Day did not jump back in. I think maybe seeing his mentor and one of the most respected offensive minds and play callers at, like, NFL, college level, both, seeing him be imperfect at times and lose a game with a frankly, like, baffling game plan and in-game play calling, and Ryan Day not giving in and immediately taking that back, and seeing that, like, he wasn't perfect either throughout his time as an offensive play caller. And, like, that's just going to be the way it works when you're at the top of the pyramid. Like, going through that and seeing Chip Kelly struggle, and then growing and adapting and evolving and winning a national title, and that things could work out. Like, maybe that will be what works in Brian Hartline's favor and in Ryan Day's favor to keep him from a play calling relapse.
I think it will. If that ever came to pass, and like Ryan Day was like toiling with that, I think going through what they went through last year will help him kind of just take a step back. And I don't know, if it wasn't Chip Kelly, if it was like literally anyone else other than Chip Kelly, and that happened, maybe Ryan Day would have taken it back. But their relationship maybe kept him from doing so, or allowed him to get to the point where he was comfortable with even letting a guy who's experienced with Chip Kelly like work through that stuff and come out on the other end of it in a much better position. Clearly they did offensively. So, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Listen, Brian Hartline could just be like awesome and it won't matter. But if they do encounter hiccups along the way, I think doing so last year with a guy who's incredibly experienced probably was pretty valuable for Ryan Day in terms of kind of allowing that evolution for any coach to happen, especially one who's doing it for the first time.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else that you gave a second thought to after we left on Friday that we didn't get to?
It was just nice to kind of be reminded that Billy Fessler seems to have a a pretty good handle on these quarterbacks, and it's not, it shouldn't be surprising because he was so heavily involved in coaching them last year. But he was like, sometimes you'll ask like a quarterbacks coach, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of this guy? What do you think of this guy? And they'll just speak sort of in generalities, which sometimes make you wonder, like clearly the starter, but like, do you know the room? It feels like Billy Fessler like really knows the room. Even Tavian St. Clair, who hasn't been here that long and is just now kind of getting started as a college football player, even though he was along for part of that playoff push. Like the relationships there seem strong. I think the understanding of skill sets and where guys need to get better seems pretty strong. And I thought maybe most important with all of that was Billy Fessler, I think, projecting a lot of confidence in his ability to get out of those guys what he needs to. So just like for a guy who's very young, I thought he was just kind of generally pretty impressive.
Did he call it a quarterback controversy for Berm's sake, or no?
He did not call it a controversy. The one interesting thing that he did say, what like when describing Julian saying was like saying that Julian, like I'm paraphrasing, but like was in a competition last year and didn't win, which I thought was like an interesting way to put how it went last year when, we kind of talked about it, but I think we all rightly assumed that it was going to be Will Howard's job. But Billy Fessler like didn't quite couch it that way, which I thought was just like an interesting kind of look back on how they were viewing Julian when Julian first got here. Oh, I guess all that does is put more pressure on him now. But the way that he talked about him from last season, I thought was kind of interesting.
I wasn't over there for that. I just bounced over for 2 seconds to ask you if he named a starter as a joke, and then walked back away. Well, he was framing that in terms of against Will Howard or against Devin Brown for the backup job.
I guess he didn't say. He just said competition and left it at that. So I guess it could have been. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, and he meant for the number 2 job and not the number 1 job. But either way, they view him as like someone who's sort of gone through a quarterback competition already, which is fairly valuable experience for a guy who's as young as Julian. And he was asked. He did not name a starter, but he was asked if he had a pecking order, and you'll be surprised to hear that he does not.
Oh, he doesn't? Oh,
yeah.
I'm going to assume they're going to, get into the first 3 weeks of practice and they're going to roll them. And sometimes you might see one guy with the 3s and sometimes you might see him with the 2s and they'll all get a shake. And then maybe they'll reevaluate that after 3 weeks, or maybe they won't, because practice 1 through 15 in spring is then just a build up to practice 16, which is in August. So
you're exactly right.
Oh yeah. I'm learning so much, getting up in age and figuring out how all this works. It's great to have that perspective on it. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop talking about those quarterbacks anytime soon. And I bet that there's going to be a longer discussion this week about the quarterbacks because we need a review and a preview of what happened a year ago. And spring ball does start in 1 week, 1 week from almost right now. The Buckeyes will be out there. Looking forward to that. Don't know how much we're going to see, but we're going to see part of it. And we're going to get ready for it on the podcast daily all week long. Thanks for joining us for this show. A little Monday musing with Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. We'll see you guys later at Roosters. Have a great day.